Now I'm pleased to welcome the chief guest of our today's program, Sri Vivek Sawant. Before I hand over to Sri Sawant, I'll introduce him to all of you. He is the chief mentor at MKCL, that is Maharashtra Knowledge Corporation Limited. Sri Vivek Sawant was the managing director of MKCL since its inception in 2001. Also, he has been the pioneer of MSCIT program. Under his leadership, MKCL has emerged as a high-tech initiative of the government of Maharashtra, and his work has focused on technology for all. When schools went to online mode in March, several students were unable to learn. Children who are underprivileged are unable to bear the cost of internet and mobile phones. Under his mentorship, MKCL developed and telecasted TV serials named Tilimili, aiming quality education for all. These episodes focus on experiential learning and stress-free education. Nearly 2.5 crore students benefited from this online but free of cost education program. Sri Vivek Sawant has been recognized by several awards for his contribution in the fields of education and leadership development. Also, he is the chair of Jnanaprabodhini Sanshothan Sanstha Pune. It's our privilege to have you today. Thank you for your time. Let's move on to the next segment of the program, that is inauguration of book. Thank you, sir. Thank you, all of you. Today, on September 6, 2020, I'm extremely delighted to announce that this book, titled Learning to Explore Project by Project, has been published at the hands of Sri Vivek Sawant. We hope that this book will champion the cause of providing quality and accessible education to all. On this very high note, I would like to request Sri Vivek Sawant to enlighten us. All is yours, sir.
I first of all thank the Jnana Prabodhini Foundation. It's all volunteers, the uh, Prashantji who invited me for this program, Mahendra Bhai who is joining us here, all the intellectuals who contributed in translation of the book, the publishers, all the members of the audience, and I should not forget the hundreds of trillions of bacteria who are there in their bodies and all my friends. Okay. First of all, I must remember with great reverence the fond memories of my friend, late Professor Vivek Rao Pongshe. I miss him in today's function. I really feel that he should have been present amongst us and he would have been so elated by the efforts of the next generation of Jnana Prabodhini, passing on his legacy to the students and teachers in future. The book, when I read, of course, I could not completely read, but I must say that after reading several books and papers on project-based learning, I used to always feel that the world desperately needs one more. And this is that book, because this has been authored by an experienced practitioner who has developed tremendous insights into project-based learning. It is one thing to write a book by carrying out some literature survey, and it is quite another to actually lead project-based learning and then theorize upon it, reflect upon it. And another important thing about this book is that it is written by a practitioner for the future practitioners. The new education policy does mention that hereafter the teachers in India will be very best and the brightest. These are the two words used. Now, very best and brightest are not necessarily born, but they are cultivated. And this book will go a long way. Like Akash mentioned, that project-based learning and exploratory learning comes 18 times in new education policy. This book will go a long way in cultivating the next generation of teachers, because teachers have to be introduced formally. What is project-based learning? Project-based learning is not covered in such great details as rigorously as covered in this book in their Bachelor's of Education program or Master's of Education program. Whereas project-based learning, if it is going to be the at the center stage of learning, then this book goes a long way in ensuring the cause of teacher training. How to become a practitioner of project-based learning needed a proper guide rather than just theory. And this book has completely accomplished it. And I say this with no exaggeration. I also really appreciate the efforts of translators. There are three stages. One is anukaran, that is imitation. Next is anusaran, that is emulation. Third, however, is anusarjan, that is transcreation. And I'm really delighted to see, because I got both the copies from Prashantji, the Marathi as well as the English. And so, being a perfect teacher, I could, the first, temptation was to check the concordance and the congruence. And I must say that there are stages where this translation has gotten into transcreation. And that shows that the translators have put their heart and mind into it. While writing the preface of the Tulsi Ramayana, Tulsidas ji says that Swanta Sukhaya Raghunatha Gatha. That is, I am writing it for my joy. Because he wrote it for his joy, hundreds of years later, we also experience the same joy while singing it or reciting it or listening it or reading it. The same is the case with this book. If the authors and the translators are enjoying writing this and translating this, the same experience goes to the readers. And that will create a multiplier effect. This book must reach across continents, and I wish the very best for the propagation of this book. The purpose of project-based learning is constructing knowledge. Peter Drucker says that information and knowledge, there are two different entities, and he says that knowledge is information in action. When you read a book on swimming, you are acquiring information of swimming. When you actually jump into the pond and start somehow surviving, then you start getting the knowledge of swimming. Osho says that there is an area in philosophy called aboutism. Osho says that about love is not love. You have to fall in love. And project-based learning makes you fall into the subject, not just remain on the banks of the or on the brink of the subject. So there is no aboutism in project-based learning. In this way, project-based learning transforms a student into learner. When you just study, you get into information from books, Google, TED Talks, or YouTube, or Khan Academy, or whatever. But when you actually engage yourself into a project, you become a learner. If you look at the word learning in the word project-based learning, if you look at the word learning, learning is not a original word in English, I suppose. It is a derived word. Because the more original word in that word is what remains after you remove L from that. That is earning. So learning is a process that leads to earning. What? Earning not money, not just money. It is earning knowledge, earning self-esteem, earning self-confidence, earning the source of self-actualization. That is the purpose of education. And project-based learning is not project-based study. So the student, it is not student here, it is the learner. Like Lord Krishna also says in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Swakartavyatmena jnanamiti shiksha. That is, you experience by pursuit of your power of doing your kartavya. So it is not just reading books. Lord Krishna is very clear about definition of education. And this is the essence of this book today. The underlying principles, as I see, are actually means Professor Pongsha has not written anything or authors have not mentioned, but see, project-based learning is a method, but it is the theoretical foundation of it is the constructivism, where the student constructs knowledge. There is an assimilation process that is going little gradually in the known area, from one known to another known, and from one known to a gradually different unknown. There is an accommodation process that you suddenly meet a different context and start, constructing knowledge in that by creating correct concepts, by experimenting, by exploring. And then there is a cultural mediation. Okay, because in project, you leave your classroom, you leave your school building and go into the open world and start interacting with many people, and you connect to yourself also. And there is a cultural mediation. There are larger cultural groups than just teachers involved here. And that is how you come across three more steps in that. And those are seen in between the lines when you read this book as academicians, because I'm not addressing students here, I'm addressing the academicians who will practice project-based learning. So they must know that principle of construction of knowledge, principle of assimilation, principle of accommodation, principle of social mediation, all are very nicely interwoven in this book. Wonderfully done. I'm so delighted. And most important is, in project-based learning, there is principle of respecting individuality. When a developmentalist meets one child, he thinks all children are alike. When he meets two children, he considers that the universe is dichotomized. That is, either there are masculine children, feminine children, or introvert or extrovert children. But when he meets three children, then he knows that every child is different. Okay, and the project-based learning respects that individuality. How beautiful was the experience to learn to that girl, Ed Standard girl, who created her novel. You know, what a great respect for individuality, project-based learning. She must have remained as a hidden talent unless project-based learning was an opportunity in her life. Such a novel may not have come up, So, and not only that, in project-based learning, there is communication. This is not communication of students' difficulties in how to do the project, but these are communication of an experienced teacher with the student for metacognition. That how am I, achieving cognition? So it is cognition of cognition. And that communication takes place in project-based learning. It doesn't take place in a followership in typical lecture mode or Google mode or whatever. In information consumption, it doesn't take place. The adhyapak is the one who gives information. Pandit is the one who gives thoughts. Acharya who gives the vidya. The drashta is the one who gives you the foresight or the duradrushti, as you say. And the guru is the one who makes you that you are swasamvedya, that you can know yourself. And this is the light that the guru brings. Project-based learning brings that swasamvedyata. Because you start not only understanding the subject, but you start discovering yourself. That is the purpose of education. So the teacher who gives you project-based learning is actually, elevates to the level of a guru, not just adhyapak. That is the very interesting thing about project-based learning. Most important thing is that in project-based learning, it is a joyful learning, because when you learn, when you say eat some sweets, you get pleasure. When you remember suddenly that, in the third standard I stood first in the class, you get happy. It's a completely emotional state. But when do you experience joy? Only human beings experience joy. And for that, there are six things. Number one is exploration. When you start exploring, you start enjoying as a human being, because it is related to neocortex. Experiencing, experimenting, explaining, then explaining, and then executing, and finally educating someone. Look at the phase of presentation in the project. You are educating someone. You are making it not as a just an individual property, but making that knowledge as a collective property. You're educating. So these six E's make you joyful, not just pleasure or happiness, but joy. And project-based learning brings you that. I think this is the classic, gift of project-based learning to us, in which there is action followed by reflection. Professor Pongshe has written beautiful chapter on reflective practices. Action followed by reflection, reflection followed by conclusion, conclusion followed by pragmatic planning, and pragmatic planning followed by again action. So you are having a wonderful cycle of learning or circle of learning in which you start enjoying yourself. This is the key of project based learning. And most important thing is that you are not only giving output, but there are outcomes. A, a good project based learning teacher will look not only as the output of the project, but also the outcomes of the project. The outcomes are in terms of new knowledge, new skills, new attitudes, new values, and new temperaments. That makes the enrichment of the personality of the learner, which doesn't happen in a classroom mode where one is teaching to the students. This is the gift of project based learning. Finally, I would say that I give all my best wishes to the Gnan Prabodhini team, Akash and all his volunteer friends. And I personally thank all the organizers to have been given this opportunity to speak to you. Remember Professor Vivek Pongshe and admire the great effort done by all the youngsters who some of them spoke and some of them did not speak today, but I could see and listen to the hearts of all of them. And I really thank Gnan Prabodhini Foundation for this great event. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for your inspiring words. It was great listening about experiential learning and examples from Bhagavad Gita from you. And as you said, PBL is about enjoying the learning process. It has been our pleasure to have you with us today. On the behalf of Jnana Prabodhini and Jnana Prabodhini Foundation, I thank you for providing your gracious presence to join us today to enhance our joy. And thank you for your compliments.